All right, we are now recording. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion. My name is Amber Hefner. I am the Executive Director of Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. And I wanted just to make a few introductions quickly for the panelists who will be sharing with you today. First of all, we have Brianna Abate. She is the Associate Professor of Communication at, sorry, Brianna, at Prairie State.
Prairie State College.
Prairie State, thank you. We have Julie Weissauer, who is the Department Chair for Fine and Applied Arts of Parkland College. And we have Lindsay Zilli, who is the Director of Professional Learning at Illinois Digital Educators Alliance. So thank you, ladies, for preparing and presenting to us today. And with that, Julie, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Amber. I appreciate everybody joining us today. It's a busy day, and this is very interesting that we're doing this over Zoom or remote, and we've had to kind of pivot and move online pretty quickly last spring, and now people are getting used to it. And we have issues with equity and accessibility, and so we decided it might be a good idea just to get together and talk a little bit about some solutions that we might have, whether we're teaching online or in the classroom. And I think we're here today to hear about some ideas and to share ideas about what you've been doing, what's worked. We're going to hear from our panelists today about some things, and hopefully you'll take away some ideas, some things that you can do to make your materials and your courses more accessible, and also some ideas maybe to enhance or improve what you're doing already, because I know many of you are already doing some things. So we're going to first, I think, hear a little bit about the concept of universal design and what that is. And then we're going to hear about some tools and solutions that we can use as we go. So I think, Amber, are you going to start us off with talking a little bit about the universal design concept and some solutions? Is that correct?
We're going to let Brianna take it first.
Great.
Okay, so universal design. So universal design, I want to distinguish first from backwards design. And those are two very important concepts. And because we've all sort of been thrown into being online educators almost overnight in the spring, it's important to make sure that we are using every tool we have in the toolbox. So universal design is a strategy by which we create a course which is mindful of all people and all accessibility types and levels. So backwards design is asking yourself, where do I want students to end up? What do I want them to be able to do at the end of the semester or the end of the course? And then you work backwards incrementally to be able to give them that little skill set. There we go. Universal design is the way in which we make sure the door is open for everybody. So I am a person who is sighted. I am a person who has color spectrum vision. I'm a person who has hearing, but not everybody has those things when they come into a classroom. So what we're going to look at today are some ways that we can make a classroom more accessible for everybody. So I'm going to switch over from my visage over to a document here. So the first thing that you want to know about this is that when we're talking about universal design, you want to know that it is important for all of us, even if you're a person who happens to be sighted and hearing. You have to understand that there are issues at play. So if you're still thinking, I don't care about accessibility, what's in it for me? Well, being on the right side of the law is always important. So there is the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Americans with Disabilities Act mean that anybody who is a college receiving funds, which all of our colleges do, need to be able to adhere to these guidelines. So it's really important to make sure that we're running not afoul of things like accreditation, but also more importantly, if ever you've had the experience of having your course already set up, ready to go, and then you receive an email from your Office of Disability Services stating, hi, we have student X who has XYZ accommodation, and then you scrambling to try to retrofit your course, you know how frustrating that can be and how a little time in preparation can make that easier. So what we're going to look at today is a syllabus. And the reason I choose a syllabus is because it is the boilerplate document that we all see, right? So the first thing that we're looking at here in the syllabus is a general glance at it. So if I'm a fully sighted person, I'm looking at this going, okay, COM 101, Principles of Communication, there's the Prairie State logo, no big deal. If I'm a person who is not sighted and I'm using a screen reader program in order to view, as it were, this document, what it reads to me is this: COM 101, Principles of Communication, image, instructor, Brianna Elabate. If I am relying on a screen reader, I don't know if what I as a sighted person can see is just the Prairie State logo. I don't know if that's important information or if that is something just randomly there. So it's important to make sure that we are using information in a way that is accessible to everybody. A good way to do that is to give images to and captions to all of the information we have. So for instance, if I click on this, I can scroll down to edit alt text and I can add the information in. Just a quick explanation of what this is. PSC logo is all you need to let folks know that this is what the information is. That way, no one has to wonder whether or not that information is germane to them. When I look down at the next part here, my name and my email, what to me looks balanced because I like things justified to the edges of the screen. If I'm hearing this through the perspective of a screen reader, it says, email Brianna, biabate@prairiestate.edu, blank, 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 a million times until it gets over to the Calendly link. The problem with that is it's frequently annoying. So you want to avoid hitting the space bar 1,000 times when you're creating a document, even though it looks good to us. You got to think about the formatting and the markup behind the situation. So what you have there is the opportunity to use tabs. So a screen reader will say tab 4 times and then it will move to the next item. Again, you're not only seeing with your eyes, but you've got to see through the perspective of those who cannot. Next, we have this Calendly link here. So I use Calendly for students to be able to make their appointments with me. It's a fantastic tool. What is very frustrating though is if I am a person using a screen reader and I don't know what Calendly is, now I've got to click on it to be able to get to it. So I can just use Calendly, or I can say, make an appointment with me here. Doing this allows the screen reader the ability to let the student using it know what this link is for without them having to leave the document. This descriptive text is a way to make sure that you are being more inclusive. Again, if I just see a link and I'm a student who is sighted, I know I can come back to that later. If I am a person using a screen reading device, it gets a little bit more complicated. Using descriptive links instead of random words or random URLs is a much more inclusive way to go. You also want to think about the information that you've got embedded. So our course description, prereqs, course materials, etc. This is banal boilerplate stuff you have in all of your syllabi. The more stuff that is external or references that you make to other places that you can link to, the better. So for instance, the course catalog. Certainly my students can go and research the course catalog, but a better way to do that is to have it linked right here. So nobody has to navigate away from here and open a new browser and get to it. We also want to make sure that the language is as specific as possible. So I'm going to draw your attention right here into required materials. So if you're a sighted person, you're seeing it says required materials, and you see a single textbook. But again, a screen reader program is going to say required material, open parenthesis, S, close parenthesis, and then there's one book listed. That is going to be very frustrating to a person who isn't sighted because they're thinking they're missing information. So instead of required materials, simple change to required textbook makes that language much clearer. We have the same thing with regard to all of the course goals and objectives, all the same boilerplate that everybody's got. Campus resources. When I want to link to any resources that are around campus, I want to go ahead and link to those directly instead of a click here. I also have these academic and personal hyperlinks here can take you to a video. So for instance, when we made the switch online, we decided one of the best ways to incorporate our students into the campus experience that they would otherwise be missing out was to have the folks around campus make 2 to 3 minute short videos introducing themselves. So Tanya, the woman who runs our Office of Disability Services, does a quick 2 minutes. Hi, I'm Tanya. If you need help, if you have questions, here's who to talk to. This way students can attach names and faces without worrying that they are just sending an email into the void. On campus, I can walk a student down to somebody's office and they feel sort of handheld and connected, right? In this virtual space, they don't have that. So any way that you can force these connections on a student's own terms makes life easier for them. Similarly here, the library's electronic database, we've got a lovely little video from the library. So instead of having this link, which is random and would be read digit by a screen reading program, I can take that information and I can add it into this click to make an appointment with the librarian here. And it is a lot easier for folks who are using screen reader applications. The next thing that we want to talk about is using color and other different ways to differentiate information. So if you teach speech, you know that the II course requirements are very serious. We beat this drum a lot with our students. If I want to set text apart, I'll often use a different color or underlining, bold, something like that, right? If I am a person who doesn't have color perception, I don't know that this last sentence is in red. It just looks slightly gray to me if I can't view things in red. So I can be perfectly sighted but not have color perception, which means that this sentence that I meant to stand out doesn't for those students. So a better way to do that is to use bold, because underlining, while that's another way that we like to set our text apart, underlining is very difficult for folks with dyslexia to read. So instead of underlining or instead of using a different color, I can use bold, or for instance, I can put an asterisk, something that makes it clear that it is separate and important information, but isn't exclusively relying on your color perception abilities. It's also important to recognize that we have lots of information in here and you want it to be as concise as possible, which I know is hilarious for like a 10-page document. But the amount of work that we have in each of these asks you to be as consistent as possible. So if I'm scrolling through this, I'm looking at tons of work, and then I'm a student, right? So I'm going back down to the thing that I care most about. What are you grading on? When is everything due and how many points? This table, just like the picture that we saw earlier, you can have an alternative text. If I am looking at this with my eyes, I know that I'm looking at the grade scale, right? Here are all my items, here are my points, here are my due dates. If I am looking at this through a screen reader, it's going to read every single item unless there is a title on this table. When I'm giving my first cursory glance as a student, I don't necessarily want to hear every single point and every single due date. What I do want to hear is this is the grading scale, or this is the table of evaluation items, whatever that is. So you want to think about it, again, not from the perception of the person writing it, but from all of the various perceptions of the people who will be encountering it. The last thing that you want to look at is this. What does the document look like as a whole? So I am looking at things like table headings. So this little group of information up here, which sometimes you accidentally click on and it changes things and you wonder what in the world happened. These are specifically for things like screen reading programs. This item right here, the very first thing, should always be heading 1. Everything that follows subsequently should be heading 2. And you should follow those things in order because it helps block out that information in a way that makes sense to a program reading it to a person who isn't sighted. So again, if I'm looking at this document, I see how large this font is, and I see that it narrows. And then until I get to the next item, course objectives, I see that that changes. Okay, so then I see that it narrows again. To me, that is a very easy way of being able to see that that information has been schematized. But again, I'm relying on my site to be able to do that. Using these headings is a good way to make sure that you are making the information easy and accessible for every one of your students who will interface with it. And then finally, you want to choose a font that makes sense, a font and a font size. So you want to choose something that is serif versus sans serif. If you've got squiggly lines at the end of your letters, sometimes they look beautiful, but also sometimes they are impossible to read. That's also more difficult on screen. Like, this looks lovely to me, but this will make your eyes bleed if you're staring at it on the screen, and it's much more difficult for a screen reader to see. So make sure that you are not making life more difficult for students, some of whom are looking on their cell phones, some of whom are having it read to them, some of whom are trying to do this on the go. You want to make it as approachable and accessible as possible. Once you've got all of that done, you want to know what this looks like in terms of somebody who isn't sighted, doesn't have hearing, etc. And a good way to do that is to go to your accessibility checker. So up here under review, I can click check accessibility, and it tells me right here, no accessibility issues are found. So that's awesome, because the problems that I had embedded in there, we went ahead and fixed. This little box, if you're starting your syllabus from scratch or you're creating new documents, tests, etc., you can go up to review and to accessibility checker, and you tick this little box, and it will keep this running for you. So you can have this box open as you're creating things. For me, it's easier to just fix everything and then have the checker run and then see if there are any problems. But if you want to be able to check things as they go, this is a neat little way in real time to see whether or not the information that you have is accessible to everybody. So with that, we want to make sure that our font size and type is accessible. We want to make sure that we're not using color or underlining as the only way of differentiating text or meaning or messages to folks. We want to make sure that we are as inclusive as possible, even things like words and the language that we're using. So we think about universal design in terms of making sure folks with disabilities or different needs are accommodated. We don't talk enough, I believe, about accommodating different types of people. A very simple way to be able to incorporate all of that into your course is through your printing. That lets your students know that you are being as accessible and open, and using language that is inclusive, ours versus yours, our responsibility, our course, by using non-gender specific pronouns when you're talking about students, etc. The best way is to cast as wide a net as possible, and then you've got room for everybody. And with that, I will go ahead and send it back over to the group. I have this cleaned up version of the syllabus that is available. I will add it to the group information so that when the presentation is up, you can also see this as well. So you can pull any of this stuff and put it in your own work. Amber, back to you.
Brianna, thank you so much. That was incredible. Like, I am just awed right now. So many things. And I mean, we talk about UDL and what we do, and Lindsay's going to present on some other accessibility features and programs, but I had never really thought through the details of everything that you just talked about. But gosh, it does make so much sense. So I can't wait to get the recording and rewatch it myself and pick up on all of that. So thank you so much. I'm going to now turn it over to Lindsay, Director of Professional Learning at IDEA. And Lindsay's going to share about accessibility features when using Apple, Google, and Microsoft.
All right. Thank you very much. Like, just reiterating what Amber said, that was really eye-opening and really helps me be more self-reflective on the work that I'm sharing with people. So thank you for that. I would love to share some tools with you specific to Microsoft, Apple, and Google, as well as some other just tools that are accessible no matter the device. And I think it's important to note that We utilize technology to help personalize experiences, but to also level the playing field. And it's important that everybody has access to the same type of learning experience, regardless of their abilities. So to do that, oops, I went ahead of myself. Every learner is going to need support in different ways. And now it looks a little bit different than it did in the past, because we are either hybrid learning or remote learning, or we're not directly in front of our learners and they have to access, as Brianna was saying, on their phone or on their computer, or on a tablet or an iPad. And so in order to support learners, we have to know kind of some tricks and some things that are being offered. So the first thing that I wanted to share is that we have partnered with Microsoft, Google, and Apple to create these 1-hour webinars. And so these specific webinars are linked here, and we'll be sure to share that with everybody. And they are accessibility specific. So everything you'd love to know about Microsoft features, tools, and accessibility is in this 1-hour webinar. Same goes for Google and Apple. In addition, we also have on our website various other trainings and resources that are free recordings to kind of peruse and figure out, okay, how do I level the playing field for this type of learner? How do I leverage certain technological applications to make sure that what the content I am attempting to teach is, able to be consumed by all types of learners. So we have various other recordings via webinars. We've divvied it up based on the technology tool as well. And this is something that you yourself could use, but you can also push out to your learners and your students, because it's important for them to also know how to advocate for themselves and how to feel empowered when it comes to taking ownership over their own learning. So I've also linked that as well within our slide deck that I'll be sure to share with everybody. But let's start with Microsoft. Microsoft does a phenomenal job of embedding accessibility features in many of their programs. So whether it's OneNote or PowerPoint or Microsoft Teams, they really are considerate about how all users are utilizing their products. So the one tool that I really want to focus on is called Immersive Reader. An Immersive Reader is a little icon that looks just like this. It's available across all of the Microsoft platforms. So that's amazing. But Microsoft also has partnered with various other technology tools and embedded it within their sites as well. So things like Buncee and Wakelet and Flipgrid and Wonderopolis, these are all not necessarily Microsoft based, but can be used on any type of device and still utilize this Immersive Reader feature. So what I wanted to show you is what that really looks like. So if I were to go to Wakelet, and Wakelet is one of my favorite curation tools. It allows you to just grab a bunch of different links and presentations and communications and put it in a one-stop shop. So this is just an example of a curation document. And you can see here is that Immersive Reader button. When I click on it, it brings me to a variety of options. First, you'll notice that it enlarges the text. I can click on any piece of text and it will either reiterate it by saying it out loud. It will also, in many cases, provide images for perhaps some, maybe there's language barriers or maybe there's some sort of reading deficit. And it just helps kind of helps people better understand the text. I can have the whole section be read out loud. In addition, I can enlarge the text size even more. I can change the font. As Brianna was saying, font is so important, especially if learners are dyslexic, but also right now we are really ramping up our screen time. And so our eyesight is going to be impacted. So we need to make sure we're picking fonts and picking text size that is helping, not hurting our eyesight. There's also various themes, so I can change the way that the text looks. This is really helpful for people with visual impairments as well. Not having that bright white background, but having it almost that inverted color is really important. Now, in addition to these options, I can also go to this next little tool here, and it's the grammar option. So this breaks it down by syllables if necessary, or parts of speech as well. So it's kind of nice to be able to turn these on and off based on my audience. It can show the labels, and that also, if you have English language learners, or if it's a particular lesson you're working on, is just a really nice way to level the playing field. And then finally, within Immersive Reader, we have this line focus option, which is really cool because it blurs out or blacks out everything except for the line that you are working on, and allows the reader to really focus and kind of track where they're at within that passage. We can turn that picture dictionary on or off based on our audience. And then Microsoft has so many different languages already added within Immersive Reader. So if I changed it, I can change it by word or by the full document. And now here I'm able to offer my course to any global learner without worrying about having to translate anything. If I take my syllabus, I can do this as well. So it's a really nice way to, again, provide access to people of diverse backgrounds. So that is Immersive Reader. In addition to being on all Microsoft tools, these are just a couple other tools that Immersive Reader can be found on: Buncee, Wakelet, Wonderopolis, and Flipgrid. The next topic I want to talk about is with Google. And the G Suite also does a really great job of providing accessibility to all learners. And I love Google because I'm working on a Mac right now, but my preference is working within Google because it is so collaborative. What Google has done is put together an accessibility training YouTube channel. So you don't know what you don't know. And it's nice to have this channel so that I can see all of the different options that I need to take into consideration when I'm planning a lesson, a unit, or just putting together a course in general. So what was really interesting for me to find was this Braille display as a part of Google. Maybe that's something that I'm not really well versed in. So I have a quick 1 minute 42-second video that I could watch, familiarize myself with it, and also a resource that I can share with learners or students. So this YouTube channel is very helpful because they're quick little bites of information, easy to consume, but also easy to share. A lot of times when you're working in a new tool, it can be very daunting to try and figure out these accessibility pieces. But this sort of resource really helps kind of with the planning process ahead of time. So Google does a great job as well with providing those accessibility pieces. And you can kind of see here, Slides has embedded that closed captioning feature, which is really nice. You can turn it on. It does have a little bit of a lag, but it does keep up fairly well. There's voice typing and editing. There's tons of Google extensions, which I will show you in a few minutes, that can be added to these Google tools as well to help both simplify the process you take when it comes to creating things, but also communicating with students and leveling the playing field in that way. And then next, we'll talk a little bit about Apple. Apple does a great job as well. And whether it's a Mac or an iPad, they have a bunch of different resources. And Apple also has some free coaching sessions almost weekly that you can sign up for, and you just attend a webinar just kind of like this, and they tell you a specific tool that they're working on, but they also have ones that are specific to accessibility features within iPad or accessibility features within a Mac. They break it down really easily, but they also do a nice job of giving you time to kind of play and sit with the tools so that you can experience it and be there to ask questions to the experts and get some answers right away. So I'll be sure to get you the link to this. But this page talks about voiceover, screen recordings. One of my favorite things is this extension here called Google Keep. And it's just really great, especially at the higher ed level. If I'm taking notes, I can quickly push this page to a Google Keep, and it's taking the notes for me. So if I added that and I wanted this page from Apple to be saved, I can add it to my Google Keep, and it's just one click away. So I wanted first, though, to show you one of these specific tools with regards to Apple. And it is, you can access it on your computer, on your phone, or your tablet, and it's called Safari Reader View. And so actually what I have to do is open it in Safari versus Chrome. And as you can see, it looks like a normal website, but the difference is, sorry, the chat sometimes blocks my tools up here. The difference is what I want to be able to do is block out all of the extra nonsense. So the pictures of ads that pop up, and it's just a matter of clicking on these lines up here at the very top. And once I do that, you'll see it very nicely eliminates all of the extras and gives you just kind of that PDF or that article version of the passage that you're attempting to read. This is especially nice when using your phone. So if your students are using their phones to read articles that you've assigned to them, it is so much nicer to have this because it just takes up their entire screen versus them having to shift back and forth or pop-ups blocking things. So that Safari Reader View really does make a big difference. And it's, again, just a matter of clicking these lines up here, but you have to be sure, see how all this extra stuff that got blocked out because of that. You just have to be sure that you are opening your links in Safari versus Google Chrome. And then the last piece with Apple is this voiceover. So actually, let me open that again. So already built in is the ability to click on a piece of text and you can add the start speaking option. I can click on one word or I can highlight an entire passage. So if, for example, there isn't immersive reader, sorry, the ad's playing right now. If there isn't immersive reader available, you can highlight a portion of the text and then using the Apple buttons, you can have it speak that page, that passage, or that word. Lastly, I wanted to just share a couple of tools that I also think are very helpful to kind of level the playing field. So the first of the tools is a custom cursor. A lot of us are doing some teaching online, and it's hard sometimes to get your students to be aware of where to look on the screen. So if you'll notice right now, my cursor is a different shape, it's enlarged, but it is because of this extension called Custom Cursor. And I can choose any of the predetermined tools, but I can also upload my own picture. So if I wanted it to be, you know, my college's mascot, I could add that here. And I can even increase the size of this cursor even more and make it really big so people see really obviously on the screen, or I can make it a little bit smaller. But it's just nice when you're sharing your screen for it to be obvious where you want your students to look. Another extension that I enjoy using, especially in this remote setting, is this Move It extension. You can set how long you want it to kind of go off and take over your screen. So if you're teaching for a long period of time, you can set it for 20 minutes. And then it will literally take up your entire screen and tell you and your students to get up and move. And it's just a great way to embed that kind of movement break and just be mindful of how hard it is to just sit for so long. Mote is another extension that I really like, and Mote is it works really well with Google tools, but it allows you to provide voice feedback, so verbal feedback on whatever your students are turning in. So you're able to just provide, instead of typing it out, it will record your message and add it to the piece of evidence that your students turned in. There's also things like Pear Deck, which allow for that engagement, allow for your students to be a part of the lesson and constantly receive feedback. I showed you Google Keep. Google Keep is a separate tool in and of itself, but it also is an extension up here. Closed captions. We use a tool called Rev to allow us for closed captionings in Zoom. Otherwise, Zoom only allows you to do closed captionings as you're typing them. So it is a little bit more of an effort to do it that way. So we have Rev for that. Loom is a screen recording option that is helpful to make videos and tutorials. And then there's things like Read and Write and Co-Writer, which are programs that allow for accessibility with literacy in reading and writing. And then finally, Screen Shader. And Screen Shader is a tool that allows your students to kind of adjust the settings of their computer so that they can dim the lights or change invert the colors so that it's, again, easier on their eyes when they're sitting there for a long time. So all of these are really great ways to level the playing field. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that many of these tools will be presented on in further and greater detail during our conference in February. We do have specific Microsoft, Google, and Apple breakouts, and I'm sure this will be a big part of their presentations, but that's something for you to look forward to if you're looking for more information on any of these tools or any of these subject areas. So that is all I have. I'm going to pass it back to Amber.
Thank you, Lindsay. I always, even though we work on these together and I feel like I'm in these sessions quite often, I always learn something more when you share some of the accessibility features. Especially, I love the one where you can clean up all of the ads and stuff like that. Especially for my high school son who gets very distracted when he's doing research online and sees all of those other things in the background. So thank you so much for sharing that. And now I just want to turn it back over to Julie. I think she was going to share some additional information on tools and get us concluded.
Thanks, I appreciate that. The great information. Maybe this might be a really good time just to ask those who are here, are there any questions, anything that you've tried, anything that you would like to share before we head into the kind of the final piece of this, and then we'll come back for more questions too. There's a lot of great information out there. If anybody in the chat, you can also, can everybody access the chat? Is everyone enabled, Amber, to chat if they need to?
It looks like they have had some discussions and it looks like Brianna has answered quite a few of them so far. So feel free to ask any questions to Lindsay on the information that she just shared as well.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that we're really struggling with at Parkland is, we have a lot of instructors who've been doing this for a long time, and that is teaching. And all of it seems like now we have to do something new because, all of the materials maybe we have developed over the years aren't really accessible. So that becomes an issue. And also, if we want to create video ourselves and put it in our learning management, that kind of thing, it's very, very difficult to do that. And who will caption all of these things that we have? And that's been an ongoing issue. I don't know if everyone else has experienced that, but faculty are pretty frustrated with the notion that maybe they can't use what they want to use, or what they use, they're going to have to find something else because it isn't accessible. So one of the things that we have done, and I'm going to try to share my screen here. Today I've been having a difficult time getting what I want up. One of the things that we've started using is TechSmith Relay, which is now Nomia. I don't know if anyone has used it or knows about it, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to share it on my screen. It just doesn't appear. Here we go. So I'm going to share this with you. Our college uses it. It is embedded in the our learning management system. So what this is, it's a way to easily create and share media. We can make videos that are accessible, and what you can do is record. Let's say you want to do a 2-minute, little video, and you do that. You can do it from your webcam. You can do it, anywhere, your phone. And when you do that, it isn't captioned. But if you run it through Nomia, it will caption it for you. And what's really neat about that is it takes a lot of the work out of your hands. Obviously, closed captioning isn't 100% perfect. So a lot of times you have to go back and sort of edit, but it's very easy to do that. You just have to make sure, that everything you want is there the way that you set it. And so it is a way to help teach online and make it much more doable. And so this is one tool that we have done. And what is very nice here is that we can, it's embedded in our learning management system. So you can really just upload these things, and it's very easy to do. As opposed to having to perhaps go through YouTube and then link it into your learning management system and that kind of thing. So this is another way. Obviously, they do have a free trial so people can try it, but it is something that an institution would have to buy into if they were going to make this available to folks. So that's one way that we have tried to get a handle on all of this captioning sort of issues. And that's been really tough. I think the college here now is trying to find or maybe hire maybe a part-time person who would be able to take materials that faculty already have that are not accessible and caption them. Because that's usually a barrier for faculty. If you find something really cool that is maybe not accessible, you can't use it. And sometimes, you're prepping, you're looking, you're finding things, and it may be last minute. So you don't have a lot of time. It would be great if we could plan it all out ahead of time, but sometimes some great thing comes your way, and it just would be nice to find an easy way to make it accessible right away. So that's one of the tools that we have. And as we go along here and do more with online learning, and the longer that this goes on, I think the better all of this gets and easier it is. I mean, and once you've got it, obviously it's good, but to take material that you have had and turn it into something that is accessible can be very, very time consuming, and it becomes a barrier, and faculty get very frustrated. I don't know if anybody, has any other things that they would like to share about that, or if anyone has used Nomia, or what used to be TechSmith Relay. That's good. And we have, yes, rev.com also captions content, but again, it does cost. And that's our issue. Those are the barriers. The other thing that we are really kind of looking at is this open educational resources, which has become very popular. A way to reduce costs for students is to go with open resource materials. The problem with open resource is that they're not always accessible. And we haven't yet got a handle on how to have it open resource and accessible. And some of it isn't. You know, it just has open licensing and you can access it. But it isn't very useful if you want to go with a textbook that is open resource if it's not also accessible. So that's, you know, that's kind of one of the questions for those who are, I know our institution is very interested in being able to tell students that, you know, what the costs are of textbooks and if who is using, which courses use, you know, open resources so that they don't have to purchase. So that's another one. And okay, yeah, Sunny, do you have something to add about POPs? Feel free to jump in.
Hi, sorry. They have an open resource textbook along with their website where you can upload videos and do speech writing and things like that. I would probably have to double check and make sure that they are accessible, as I don't know off the top of my head, but it's a great resource.
Have you used them, Pops?
I used a demo of them in the spring, but I don't know like the formatting of it.
Yeah, and that's our, I don't know if your institution or anybody is like ours, but now because of this, the law and what we have to do for accessibility, our institution has a checklist. So anything that we are going to utilize has to hit all of the check mark boxes in order to be able to use it with our learning management system and everything like that. And that's been a barrier. We were interested in learning more about POPs as well, but couldn't quite get to whether or not it was totally accessible. So.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask and I'd be happy to follow up with everybody on it.
Great, excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate that. I know that there are a lot of other kinds of great tools out there that are open resource, and then this is an issue. Obviously, with things that are PDF or I think things that are just documents, you know, you can run it through that accessibility checker. Isn't that right, Brianna? You can take an existing document and run it through that accessibility checker, and it can point out things that are not accessible. Is that correct? I think it is. I'm not sure if you've ever done it that way, though.
Yes.
So that's a way to find out if it is accessible and if there are things that you can fix with the document too. So, you know, whether you're using your own material and building it or whether you're using someone else's material and you just want to make sure that it is a caption. Now, in my department, we have a particular kind of interesting issue that maybe I didn't run across it with comm faculty, but for example, our art faculty, you know, when they do images and you have to caption them, it's very difficult because sometimes what they do in like an art appreciation class is you have to look at an image and identify it. So if you have a caption that identifies it, you're giving away the answer to the question. So they're very perplexed on how to do this, the descriptive, so that it gives information without giving the answers. If students are supposed to identify a picture. Has anyone ever encountered that, or do you have solutions for something like that?
You're definitely bringing up things, Julie, that we should talk to some of our partners about.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point.
And this is what I mean. We in communication or in those kinds of fields don't have the same issues that, let's say, math and science do with making everything accessible there as well. So that sometimes is a barrier too. And now what we were just told in our session is at our institution is that we have to make a reasonable attempt to make things accessible. Things don't have to be 100% accessible. Sometimes either the technology isn't there or we're not there yet. And so it becomes a little bit difficult to be 100%. So know that we have to make that good faith effort and do everything we can. But again, it also needs to fit what we're asking students to do in the course too. So.
That's exactly right. Good faith is the standard, right? So me saying good faith, person who isn't sighted, go figure it out yourself. That's not good faith, right? But when I am, we teach speech. I show videos in class. It's unreasonable to ask that I stop showing videos because there happens to be a student who isn't sighted. But a good faith effort is letting the student have access to that video ahead of time so that they can listen to it, so that they're not burdened with hearing it for the first time in class and don't also have sight to rely on. I can also tell you from experience that I have had a variety of students with accommodation needs, including 4 students. About 10 years ago, I had 4 deaf students, 2 of whom were completely deaf and completely mute, both taking COM 101 and excelling. And I'll tell you, nothing bent my brain like trying to figure out how in the world I was going to teach delivery to someone who literally could not make words happen. But the good faith effort is you try to help them get to where they need to be, right? And there are disability and equity folks on every campus. Don't feel like you have to know the answers. Reach out, ask questions, ask the people that teach your discipline. The worst thing we can do is put our heads in the sand and go, I hope nobody catches on that I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like the worst that can happen is that you go, hi, fellow colleagues, I don't know what I'm doing. Could you help a girl out? I think that's always going to be the better option. It's not an accident that I studied communication. I think more communication helps us. Less communication can only get us into trouble.
Sure, absolutely. That's great. Brianna, what was your solution then for the student that had no speech, no hearing?
So, man, it completely made me rethink the way that I teach class, right? So, obviously everything was captioned. I'm not a person who lesson plans. I'm a pretty extemporaneous speaker, particularly when we've been doing it for so long, we sort of like know what our jam is, right? But I thought through my lesson plans and I let them have those ahead of time. So oftentimes, like, we'll have requests for a note taker. I just went ahead and did the whole semester that way. I didn't find out about these students until the day class started. So I know what it's like to have to retrofit your entire course for a need that you were not anticipating. These 4 young ladies had an interpreter who did sign. And I can finger spell. I can't do any sign language, but I can finger spell. So I did as many small things as I could to try to figure that out. So I met with the interpreter to try to figure out what are some like general symbols and signs that I can learn for slow down or speed up or etc. Simple things like, you know, at the end of a speech, we all clap. Well, if you're a person who can't hear, the clapping doesn't do anything for you. So we just taught everybody in the room the sign for applause, just to be a little bit more inclusive. So again, ask your students, right? I mean, like, I can't imagine what it's like to go through the world as a person without hearing. So sit down and talk with your students. How can I best help you to meet this need? There's often not a perfect answer, but everyone is appreciative when you are asking questions and when you are trying to help them.
Yeah, this is Dana. I wanted to echo that. I had a couple of years ago the same thing, a deaf and mute student, and his interpreters were fantastic. I asked a bunch of questions of his interpreters and also the students. But one thing that I did, I had, I think, like a 5-day warning that this was going to happen. And I just like changed without even like doing anything before the class even started. I changed the delivery to very non-verbally focused. And I taught nonverbal delivery, facial expressions, body language, and those kinds of things, because that is a way that students with those particular impairments can communicate. And so then the expectation was that everybody do that. And I didn't even really focus on vocal delivery at all in that particular class. Of course, I did, speak about it and give feedback to my students about that. The other thing that I learned that I thought I would just kind of tell you ahead of time. So because I'm teaching public speaking, I oftentimes got 2 interpreters and sometimes 3 in the same class, which at Prairie State, we don't have a lot of room for all those people to sit in our classrooms, but they were there. And they did this because of the oral element of it and because of speeches, it's very exhausting to sign that much. And one thing I learned from the interpreters is they wanted a list of the topics for the speeches ahead of time. This was really, really helpful for them, giving them a list of the topics, especially if it was a person, so they could familiarize themselves with the spelling of those people's names, and also so that they could create kind of like a shortcut or name again. And so that was something I would not have thought about, but the guy who did the interpreting for this class was just fantastic. Like, the reason why he had so many people trailing him was because he was a mentor and a trainer for other new interpreters. So I feel like I really learned a lot from that guy.
Yeah, that's great, Dana. Thank you so much. These are great things. I remember having a student in my class, and I didn't know until it was the day the class started that the student was hearing impaired and relied on lip reading. Well, this was a discussion class, and we were unfortunately in rows, so the student couldn't see anyone and therefore couldn't hear anyone, and it was really apparent that we really had to readjust even the way that the room was set up so that the student could see all the other students, that everyone could see everyone else, which was something that, I hadn't anticipated. Or even, the thing of it is that, a lot of times if you go to write something on a whiteboard, you've turned away from the students. And so in that moment, if you're talking, we don't think about it, but you're talking to the whiteboard, and hearing students can hear that, but the hearing impaired had no idea. So it was really stressful to have to always think about where I'm standing and what you're doing and whether the person could see enough to read your lips. Things like having PowerPoints that you can share ahead of time, having things written that you can share, videos that you can share, all of those kinds of things are helpful. And I think it's just really good that we are doing sessions like this to, you know, make sure people are thinking about that, because that's the big thing, right? Planning, thinking in ways that maybe we hadn't done before.
One of the things that I think that is helpful that's come out of the COVID madness is that it's kind of forced all of us to reevaluate the ways that we've been teaching, and or I don't know about the rest of you, but this must be universal, that there are things that I've been meaning to update for a long time, and oh, I'll get to it when I get to it because you've got 97 other things in your inbox. I'm trying to think about what the world looks like when we go back to whatever normal will be. So with regard to accessibility in UD, all of that stuff is important, and that's not going to go away when we get back into a classroom, right? But like if I wanted to go to NCA for 4 or 5 days, I would have a couple of days of classes canceled, right? So can I take the videos that I'm creating now that I'm posting on my LMS, and can I use those and bank them so that when a year from now I want to go to NCA again, I don't have to lose that content day, right? That I can make that stuff accessible again on my LMS for my, hopefully, knock wood, in-person classes. And then we don't have to lose that time. So what are some ways that I can give myself a leg up? Students get sick, we have a large early college population, right? So like there's a day in the spring where all of my 8 a.m. classes are empty because the kids are taking the ACT. Well, I can't just lose that day, but if I've got that lecture recorded, I can have it on the LMS for them and they haven't lost it. So I'm trying to think about ways that I can, and maybe other folks have some other ideas, ways that I can set myself and then by extension my students up for greater success in the future whenever we get back to.
Right, excellent. That's a great point, Brianna. And I'm thinking about how great the videos are too, because even if you're creating, you know, a couple minute videos or you're linking to videos, the great thing about that is that students can watch them again and again, so they can go back, they can re-listen to the pieces that they're having trouble with captioning for students who are hearing impaired. They can go back. Whereas if you're in class, you know, either you've taken notes or you might forget it or you may not get it. And that I think is a great thing. So my question is, I'm wondering how much will become, you know, more hybridized, you know, that our instruction will just be a little bit of both or blended, you know.
I'm hopeful that we'll have more of a blended classroom approach. I think the pedagogy is certainly telling us that that is a more heuristic way to learn. To your previous point, though, I want to point out that, so I post all my stuff on YouTube because it's got the automatic closed captioning. You can also make a transcript. And so even if I am a fully hearing capable student, the transcript is searchable, but the closed caption isn't. Searchable transcripts are a great study tool for students. So if I want to go back and learn about Monroe's motivated sequence, instead of watching my obviously thrilling 10-minute video, I can just type that in and bring it back to that point in the transcript and I can watch that. So there are benefits to everybody. And I think if we put in the time now, even though that seems absurd, if we put in the time now to make that happen, I think that'll pay dividends as.
Sure, I agree. Boy, we've had some really great, excellent ideas. I'm hoping that everybody can take something away. I know I've learned a lot of things that I will want to incorporate myself, and so I really appreciate everyone's time. I don't know if we have other questions or anybody else has anything to share, experiences that you've had with students that, you know, we can kind of brainstorm about or talk about. Or any questions you have about what you've heard. And I know we're recording, right, Amber? So this again will be, I think put up on ICTA's website at some point, which might be nice if anybody wants to go back and just get some refresh on what we've heard today. So I think that's great. Yeah, everybody, thank you so much for your time today. And if I'll put my email. If anyone has questions, feel free to email me. And I don't know if Brianna or anyone feels comfortable sharing your email too, and we can reach out to each other. I feel like we are good resources for each other because we're kind of all in this together. It's the brave new world, right?
Well, with that, I will say thank you to everyone. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.